Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another SAS seminar with guests. And this morning, we have a privilege and pleasure to have a talk by Ivan Cerovac. Ivan Cerovac is a research fellow at Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences of University of Rijeka. And he holds a PhD in philosophy from University of Trieste. He's currently working on a forthcoming book on John Stuart Mill and epistemic democracy. And today we're going to probably mostly discuss his previous book on epistemic democracy and political legitimacy. So thank you, Ivan, for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm not okay. Thank you very much, Marco Luca, for this kind introduction and for the invitation to speak in this as a guest speaker here in Center for Advanced Studies. I myself was a fellow, I think it was in 2017 or something like that. So I know how SAS works, and I'm familiar with most of the permanent fellows and the administrative staff of the center. So it's always a great pleasure to present my work here. Now, as you already said, I'll be talking about my earlier book. That's this one, the Epistemic Democracy and Political Legitimacy. And it represents actually the modified thesis, my modified PhD thesis from the University of Trieste. I'll start sharing the screen if that's fine. Let me just check. Okay. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, good. And now it should be full screen. Okay, and great. Okay, so let's start. This is the project I was working on for the approximately 10 years. I started actually doing my research in epistemic democracy in 2008, 2009. The first part of the research ended with this book in 2016. And now I'm working on another book called John Stuart Mill and Epistemic Democracy. So actually I'm extending the already developed project and applying it on some considerations from the history of political philosophy and interpreting John Stuart Mill as an epistemic democrat. So as far as I know, and I did some very basic research and I discussed this with Marco Luca, most of the current SAS fellows don't have background in political philosophy. In fact, I think that only one fellow has a background in political philosophy. So I decided not to go extremely, in technicalities and details, but instead just to present an overview of the whole argument and then to let you guide the discussion after my presentation, and then we can broaden and go deeper in some things that you find interesting or relevant to your work. So, okay, let me start briefly by asking some key questions that I want to answer in that I answer in this book, or at least try to answer in this book. Well, the first one is, can political decisions we make be right or wrong? Can they be true or false? Can they be just or unjust, efficient or inefficient? So the question is whether we can evaluate political decisions based on the quality of their results. Can we say that they are better and worse political decisions? Second is, provided that we can say so, provided that political decisions can be true or false, the question arises whether there are people who are better at getting it right or wrong, whether there are experts in politics, those who are better in producing correct or efficient or just political decisions, according to some independent criteria. And finally, if there are experts in politics, if there are some citizens who are better at getting it right than others, does this imply that those who are better should have political authority over others? These are some of the key questions I want to answer in my research. And let me give you just a brief introductory remark and a few spoilers. So what is this book about and what I'm trying to say? So it represents an inquiry into the source of legitimacy generating potential of democratic procedures. So the question is, why do democratic procedures have the potential to create, or the ability to create, legitimate decisions? What is the quality that political procedures have that enables them to create legitimate decisions? And in answering this demanding question, I defend something which is called the standard account of epistemic democracy. And according to this account, democracy's legitimacy generating potential can be found both in its moral qualities and its epistemic qualities, both in its ability to treat citizens fairly and in its ability to create correct or just outcomes, results, at least according to some political standards. What is different in this approach from other numerous approaches in political theory and political philosophy? Well, basically, this approach puts emphasis on the epistemic qualities and the epistemic value of democracy. It does not say that democracy is important and has legitimate generating potential only because it's a fair procedure, but instead puts focus on the quality of its results and its epistemic qualities. Also, one important consideration for the end, apart from some ideas in the final chapter, actually I do not offer an account how existing practices can be improved. I'm just providing a normative account of political legitimacy and assessing how can existing practices be improved or made move in the direction of the idea I'm presenting now is a work probably not for political philosophers, but for sociologists, political scientists, anthropologists, policymakers, and other experts in the field. So let me start briefly by addressing what do I mean when I talk about political legitimacy and legitimacy generating potential. Well, I usually regard legitimacy as a moral permissibility of one agent, for example, the state, to issue and enforce commands upon others, owning to the procedure or the process by which these commands or decisions were produced. This means that, for example, the state acts illegitimately if it puts you in jail for not paying taxes when it is morally from the state to do so. This constitutes the differentiation between legitimacy and mere legality of the process. So I use a normative concept of political legitimacy, the one that says and that investigates when is it morally permissible for the state to use coercive power over others. And this is the first important scheme in this discussion. When we discuss political legitimacy, we usually have two accounts, two monistic accounts, two dominant accounts: proceduralism, pure proceduralism, and instrumentalism. Let me try to briefly describe what each of the accounts says, what are the key features of each account. So instrumentalism is an account that says that political procedures have their legitimacy generating potential. They can create legitimate decisions because these procedures have high tendency to create correct or high quality outcomes. When a procedure has high epistemic value, for example, it is able to get correct answers to most political problems we have, in such cases, we are talking about epistemically valuable procedure. And if you say that such a procedure has legitimacy because it is epistemically valuable, then we are embracing some form of an instrumentalist justification. We are saying that this procedure is good as an instrument for reaching, or as a means for reaching good, high quality decisions. There is nothing good about this procedure in itself. The only quality it has is its instrumental quality to produce valuable results. Other opposite account is purely procedural account. According to this account, When we talk about legitimacy of procedures and their ability to produce legitimate results, we're actually saying that we want to focus on the intrinsic qualities of the procedure, not on the qualities of the results. So we say whatever comes from a procedure that has these intrinsic qualities will be legitimate. For example, whatever is the result of, let's say, sane, adult, and well-informed individuals and their deliberation, their voting process is legitimate, regardless of the actual quality of the decision they have produced. So we are focusing on the qualities of the process and not the qualities of the final decision, nor the process ability to produce this final decision. And of course, there are some non-monistic accounts, those that try to combine some aspects of the one and some aspects of the other account. Here is another nice preview. So when we assess the legitimate genetic potential of procedures, we can focus on different things. We can focus on state in which a decision-making procedure takes place and state that is the result of a decision-making procedure. Instrumentalism, as we have seen, actually does not focus at all on the state in which decision-making procedure takes place. It focuses on the state that is the result of such procedure. It assesses the state that is the result of decision-making procedures and uses it to evaluate the quality of the decision, but also the quality of the decision-making process. Therefore, there are no intrinsic qualities of a decision-making process. All qualities are in fact instrumental. We see which decision-making process is most capable of producing high-quality results. On the other hand, pure or fair proceduralism, which is the opposite of instrumentalism, focuses only on the qualities of a decision-making process and completely disregards the qualities of the results that are produced. It basically says we need political procedures that are fair, that treat people as equals and so on, or that meet some other intrinsic quality that is morally valuable or epistemically valuable. But we don't need to focus on it. It's completely irrelevant what kind of results this decision produces. And of course, there are these non-monistic accounts, as I've said earlier, that try to combine this and say that we need to focus both on the state in which decision-making procedure takes place and the state that is the result, or focus on the results of that decision-making procedure. I will, of course, defend non-monistic positions in a form of rational proceduralism. But in order to do so, I will try to address and discuss and reject all other positions. In doing this, there is some, like regulative ideal I will use as a foundation of my research and the foundation of my argumentative structure, and that is the liberal principle of legitimacy, a famous principle put forward by John Rawls, who says that our exercise of political power is fully proper only when it is exercised in accordance with the Constitution, the essentials of which all citizens, as free and equal, may reasonably be accepted to endorse in the light of principles and ideas acceptable to their common human reason. Or to put it this long quote, to make it more simple, the idea is simply that no one can be legitimately coerced unless sufficient reasons can be given, reasons that do not violate his or her reasonable moral beliefs. We need justification that will be acceptable to all reasonable agents. And now we go to the central part of my talk and the central part of the book, and that is the structure of the book and the three tenets of epistemic justification that I discuss in the book. So all accounts that try to use some form of epistemic justification to argue in favor of democratic procedures, but in favor of any other procedure as well, typically endorse some number of these tenets. Let me briefly go to the tenets and then we'll see how they are organized. The first is the truth tenet. It basically states that there are true or procedure independent normative standards for evaluating political decisions. There is truth in politics. Political decisions can be right or wrong, correct or incorrect, and so on. Second is the knowledge tenet. It basically says that there are some, typically few people, who know these normative standards better than other people, or that there are some experts in politics. And finally, the authority tenet, stating that this normative political knowledge of those who know better implies that they should have political authority over others, or put more simply, the idea that experts should rule. These three tenets are all related to epistemic justification of political power and different political procedures. Nonetheless, they come in a certain hierarchy. You cannot endorse authority tenet and reject the knowledge tenet, or reject the truth tenet. Because if you endorse the authority tenet and the idea that experts should rule, you also should acknowledge that there are experts and that there are some objective standards according to which you can decide who the experts are. Similarly, if you endorse the knowledge tenet, you need to endorse the truth tenet. If there are experts in politics, there have to be some procedure independent standards according to which we can decide who is better and who is worse in making political decisions, who is the expert, who is not. So the idea is that if we embrace the third tenet, we have to embrace all the other tenets before it. Nonetheless, this does not imply that we need to embrace all three tenets. There are some epistemic accounts that don't embrace either one of these tenets, and most epistemic accounts embrace only the first and only the second. So what I'm going to do now is I will try to, and this is the structure of the book, I will try to address different positions that embrace one or the other tenet and see how far should we go with this process. Which tenets should we endorse? Which tenets should we reject? So, and this is the structure of the book, following the book chapters. In the second chapter, I will discuss positions that endorse none of the three above mentioned tenets, that say, no, there is no truth in politics, there are no experts should not rule. Nonetheless, there is still some epistemic value in democratic procedures. After that, I will discuss in the chapter later tenets, positions that endorse the truth tenet, but reject the other two. And as you can see here, chapter after that discusses positions that embrace the first two tenets, but reject the third, and then positions that endorse all three tenets. What I will try to do is actually to filter between different positions and to determine what should we do, or which tenets should we endorse and which not. Just a spoiler. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to, in the end up endorsing this distribution or this model here, the idea that there is truth in politics and that there are experts in politics. Nonetheless, I will argue that experts should not have political authority over others. I will try to demonstrate that by the end of this presentation. And to be more precise, I'm going to endorse this deliberative model of epistemic democracy, one presented by David Eslund. And in fact, I will agree with many or most ideas Eslund puts forward, except some ideas about implementation. But what I believe is the innovative contribution of this research is first the discussion with alternatives, and second, and probably the most important thing, is actually the structure. I believe that, and that is what the publisher actually emphasized, the structure of this book is its main selling point, or its ability to organize all positions according to this scheme here. So let me start briefly with the first part of the talk. We are talking about the truth tenet. As we have seen here, that's the first part. Truth tenet basically claims that there are true procedure independent normative standards for evaluating political decisions, or there is truth in politics. In the second chapter of the book, I actually argue that truth tenet should be endorsed. Furthermore, I argue that and analyze and discuss accounts that do not endorse truth tenet, like pure epistemic proceduralism or pure deliberative proceduralism, and argued that these accounts should be rejected. I'm not going to go into details. I'm going to put it just on one slide, each part. It's probably approximately 20 pages each. So I'm going to give a very brief argument, otherwise we would be here for a very long time. So when talking about pure epistemic proceduralism, this is a position first produced by Fabienne Petter from Warwick University. In the later years, she actually decided to leave this position behind, but it still represents an important part in the discussion because it's very innovative and it addresses some ideas that no other position addresses. So Fabienne Petter states that democratic decision-making procedures have this potential to create legitimate decisions because of some moral and intrinsic epistemic qualities they have. That is, they have the epistemic quality that is not based on their ability to produce correct outcomes, but in the procedure's tendency to enable citizens to critically engage each other in a transparent and no authoritarian way. Of course, this account is closely related to the famous virtue epistemology. And the idea is that there are some intrinsic epistemic virtues like tolerance or non-dogmatism or I don't know, tendency to be interested in various fields and being able to look at the same problem from different perspectives and so on. So there are some epistemic virtues, and democracy will be argued as procedure with legitimate generating potential because it embodies this intrinsic epistemic virtues or intrinsic epistemic qualities. This is basically Fabienne Petter's main idea. To summarize my main argument, I basically reject this view and claim that we need some form of instrumental epistemic value in order to evaluate and to be able to improve our epistemic practices. In other way, what I'm saying is we can't simply say these are epistemic virtues or epistemic qualities of a procedure, and they are good for themselves, they are intrinsically good. In order to assess how democratic procedures can be made even better, we need to have some procedure-independent regulative ideal according to which we can modify these procedures. In order to say why being interested in viewing problems from different perspectives, why being tolerant or why being non-dogmatic and so on is epistemically a good thing, we need to have some form of instrumental justification and say, well, being non-dogmatic is good because that leads us towards truth. People who tend to see the problem from different perspectives have a higher tendency to have correct views, correct beliefs, and so on. So in the end, it seems to me that this approach falls down into a form of instrumentalism. That is, we cannot talk about purely intrinsic epistemic values. The second account I discuss in this chapter is pure deliberative proceduralism by Tom Cristiano from University of Arizona. Cristiano basically thinks that we cannot have instrumental account of democracy and democratic legitimacy because we cannot have public agreement on the quality of outcomes. Basically, what Cristiano is saying is more or less following John Rawls and principle of liberal principle of legitimacy. If we are to agree that some procedure is epistemically better, instrumentally, epistemically better than some other, we have to agree on the quality of outcomes. We have to agree that, yes, this procedure creates better outcomes, and these are the better outcomes, and then list some better outcomes. Like this procedure has higher tendency to create morally correct decisions. Let's say ban the abortion or allow the abortion or something like that. Nonetheless, in order to be able to do that, we have to publicly agree on what correct decisions are. But in the conditions of reasonable pluralism, where various reasonable people hold different comprehensive doctrines and hold different value judgments, it's very difficult to have a public agreement on a single set of outcomes that can be considered correct. If there is no single set of outcomes that can be considered correct, then we cannot argue that, or then we cannot evaluate procedures based on their ability to produce correct outcomes, because we cannot agree what the correct outcomes are. That is basically Tom Cristiano's main idea. Now, I reject this idea by claiming that Cristiano himself uses an instrumental argument and the instrumental type of argumentation when he says and argues in favor of deliberative over aggregative democracy. Also when he argues in favor of representative over direct democracy. Namely, Cristiano says that we should endorse deliberative over aggregative and representative over direct democracy because these procedures have a higher tendency to produce more well-being to the citizens. So the idea is some kind of intrinsic justification is present. We evaluate procedures based on their ability to produce more or less well-being. Of course, Cristiano is keeping it very generic. He's not defining what well-being is. Nonetheless, if this can present an argument for deliberation over aggregation or for representation over direct participation, then it can present a decent argument for democracy in general. Okay, so, okay, this is just a sketch here. So what have we done so far? What I argued in the second chapter of the book is I actually rejected the first two positions, pure epistemic proceduralism and pure deliberative proceduralism, claiming that we should endorse the truth tenet. What comes next in the second chapter are the positions that endorse the truth tenet, but reject the other two, knowledge and authority. So I engage them in the second chapter. Recall that the knowledge tenet basically states that there are some people, usually a small group of people, who know normative procedure independent standards better than others, that they are experts in politics. So in the third chapter, I argue that the knowledge tenet should be endorsed. And I reject positions that do not endorse knowledge tenet. For example, pragmatist deliberative democracy and something I call second personal epistemic democracy. That is Fabian Petter's new account of democratic legitimacy. So again, just a brief overview of the first part of this chapter. I discuss pragmatist deliberative democracy. It's actually grounded in American pragmatism. And it starts from the idea that political decisions can be right or wrong, so they endorse the truth tenet. And the idea that we should evaluate the decision-making system on its ability to produce correct decisions. So far, so good. Furthermore, they argue that since political deliberation is the best means for arriving at correct decisions, we should favor deliberative democracy. The hidden assumption they have, which is not explicitly put here, but nonetheless it is a hidden assumption, is that this knowledge people have is equally distributed within political community. I proceed to reject this account, but claiming that it is successful in defending and justifying the epistemic value of political deliberation. But it's not good enough to justify and explain the epistemic value of democracy. I will proceed to argue why, connecting it with the second part of this chapter about the epistemic peerhood, which they endorse as the hidden premise. In the second part of the chapter, I address a new position by Fabienne Petter. Now she addresses the truth tenet, but still believes that there is some intrinsic epistemic quality within democratic procedures. And of course, she builds her account on the idea of epistemic peerhood, where epistemic peers are defined as people who are equally likely to make right or wrong decisions. Just like Thalys or Cheryl Misak or other pragmatists I've discussed earlier, the basic idea here is that citizens are epistemic peers, at least when it comes to important, maybe not when it comes to technical decisions or technical stuff. But when it comes to important political and moral decisions, citizens can be seen as equals, as epistemic peers, as equally likely to be right or wrong. Therefore, democracy, or therefore, since there are no experts, we should have a decision-making procedure that attributes to each citizen equal political influence. Now, I find Peter's idea and also pragmatist idea of epistemic peerhood unpersuasive. In fact, citizens often agree that some special training or some other acquired competences make some people more competent to make correct decisions, more competent than others. For example, a lot of Christians, or at least Catholics, believe that their religious leaders, like the Pope, are more competent, or at least they should believe that, are more competent to make some demanding moral decisions or moral deliberation about difficult moral questions than they are. So someone who has received specialized training about this stuff, or someone who has devoted more time or more energy to think about these questions, should be more competent to produce correct results or to give correct answers. The same goes for scientists or university professors and so on. So basically the idea is citizens generally, in most cases, don't think that they are as competent as others. Citizens generally, and that's not just a descriptive claim, but also a normative claim, citizens are right to believe that some people know what to do better than they do, and some people know what to do worse than they do. So it seems that what's wrong with both pragmatist approach and Fabian Peter's second personal epistemic approach is basically that they are trying to block some form of rule by the wise by saying that there are no wise people. They are trying to argue in favor of democracy by saying that political competence is equally distributed, therefore democracy must be a justified form of and a legitimate form of decision making. I believe that that is not the case. I believe that citizens can and in fact are right to ascribe some form of expertise, even moral expertise, to other citizens, say scientists, university professors, celebrities, religious leaders, minority groups or majority groups, and so on. Nonetheless, I will proceed to claim later that it's not a problem that some know better and others don't know what should be done. The problem is the lack of public agreement on who knows what should be done. And this is actually this important idea which helps us justify democratic decision-making and stop technocracy or some other rule by the experts. So I end this chapter by concluding that knowledge tenet should also be endorsed. And to see the progress so far, of course, I have really narrowed a long discussion to a single slide, but that's something we had to do to cover the entire book. What we see so far, that I have rejected these four positions, basically argued that we should endorse the truth tenet and then argue that we should endorse the knowledge tenet. And now let's proceed forward. Now I will discuss the lowest part of this table here, and that is the authority tenet. Unlike the previous ones, when I said that truth tenet should be endorsed, knowledge tenet should be endorsed, now I'm saying that authority tenet should be rejected. And I'm discussing some positions that try to claim otherwise, that is, that focus on the authority tenet and build upon the authority tenet, like epistocracy and scholocracy. Let us just recall that the authority tenet basically says that political knowledge of those who know better implies that they should rule, experts should rule in politics. Now, I discussed two positions that are not so contemporary, mostly ancient philosophy or maybe 19th century philosophy, though there are some contemporary technocrats more in political science than in political philosophy who follow these ideas. So Plato, for example, argues in favor of epistocracy, or the rule of those who know, the rule of the wise, philosopher kings, and so on. And he claims that this procedure has the best instrumental epistemic qualities. It is the most likely procedure to produce correct, efficient, or just decisions. We all remember his ship analogy. He says, if you want to have ship sailing on dangerous waters and you want it to arrive at a destination, it should not be ruled by its crew or by its passengers who are non-experts. It should be ruled by the captain, the one who knows about the sea and the wind and the navigation and the stars and so on. So he uses this analogy in a political sense and says, in order to produce correct, efficient political decisions, we need experts. Experts who will, like philosopher kings, make all the relevant decisions for us. And I basically challenge this view and argue that it cannot meet the liberal criteria of legitimacy. So I can agree with Plato that there are correct and incorrect political decisions, or more or less efficient ways of doing politics. And I can agree with Plato that there are some people who are better at producing correct decisions, some people who are better at leading the political community towards these correct outcomes. Nonetheless, what I disagree with Plato is the idea that these experts can be publicly recognized. Namely, unlike Plato, I follow John Rawls and his liberal criteria of legitimacy, saying that all exercise of political power is legitimate only when citizens can, as free and equal, endorse such form of exercise of political power grounded in ideas and reasons they can endorse, they can see as reasonable. And now we have a problem, because while Christians can say that the Pope is the expert, and atheists can say that Richard Dawkins is the expert, and so on, so each of them can attribute expertise to some individual or group, they can all endorse truth and knowledge tenets, they cannot publicly agree on who the experts are. Therefore, attributing all political authority to some group of experts can never be fully publicly justified. Because if we decide that Pope and bishops of the Catholic Church will be the experts making political decisions for us, then at least some people, atheists, Muslims, Buddhists, and so on, will not be able, as reasonable citizens, to endorse such justification. The idea is that we cannot simply ascribe political authority to those who are considered experts by one or the other group. A more sophisticated view of epistocracy is proposal by John Stuart Mill. It's typically called scholocracy. And the idea is the following. So Mill claims that there are some citizens who are better than others in making political decisions, but he nonetheless claims that there are criteria that all reasonable citizens can recognize as relevant criteria for being a moral expert. And he says it's basically education. And the other one is like, how demanding job are you performing? But let's say basically education. His idea is those who have received more education are those who are more qualified to rule. Of course, he embraces a form of democracy or some combined regime, because he says this does not imply that only those who have PhDs or who are full professors at Ivy League universities should rule. He basically says everyone should participate in the decision-making process or decision authorization process. Nonetheless, not everyone should have equal political influence. Those who are better educated, who are experts and so on, should have greater political influence. And this is very, very sophisticated idea, and it's very demanding. And there are some, actually I consider it more in the second book than in this one. Here I actually argue that it can be rejected nonetheless. And we can reject it because it's still not unreasonable to think that there are some epistemically damaging features or biases that might be present in a group that is given greater political authority. And this is especially the case in let's say, capitalist neoliberal societies that where education is private and where education can be granted only by those who already are members of some social or economic group. In such cases, we don't need to claim that there is some epistemically damaging feature. It's enough to claim that it's not unreasonable to think there is some epistemically damaging feature, to have John Rawls and his liberal criteria of legitimacy saying no, since it's not unreasonable to think that this idea can be blocked. Therefore, I end this chapter by claiming that authority tenet should be rejected. And let's see where we are so far. So what I've done so far is I have rejected these six positions, claiming that we should endorse truth and knowledge tenet, but we should reject authority tenet. So this is the position that I end up endorsing. Of course, still we have some disagreement, and this disagreement goes about what kind of procedures that acknowledge truth and knowledge tenet and reject authority tenet can be best for displaying and utilizing this epistemic value of democratic procedures. And here I discuss deliberative and aggregative accounts. Deliberative account presented by David Estlund and aggregative account presented, for example, by Marquise de Condorcet. And what I actually do is I reject aggregative epistemic democracy, claiming in the end that we should endorse deliberative epistemic democracy. Again, very briefly, this is a far larger paper or part of the chapter. Marquise de Condorcet famously argues that aggregative democracy produces decisions of much superior quality than its deliberative counterpart. And he has this mathematical proof saying that in case that all political decisions can be expressed as binary choices, vote for or against, if citizens act alone and vote independently without pre-voting deliberation, but also if their cognitive apparatus is independent from the cognitive apparatus of other citizens, and if citizens make decisions at least a little better than a random procedure, he's giving us a mathematical proof that if these three conditions are met, then aggregative democracy will be almost infallible. In fact, the more people participate in the decision-making process, the higher will be the chance that the final decision will be correct. And we can see it here on this sketch to the right of your screens. What he's basically saying is the larger the group that participates in the majoritarian decision-making process, the greater the chance that the final decision will be correct. To help you understand this, we can basically say, imagine that you have a normal coin and you flip the coin. So the chance that the coin will come out heads or tails is 50%. And if we, flip a coin 1,000 times, it's still 50-50 chance. The chance that we will have a ratio like 700 to 300 or 800 to 200 is actually decreasing the more times we flip the coin. However, if we have an imperfect coin, a coin that has higher tendency to end up tails or end up heads, for example, let's say that it has 55 chance of ending up heads. In such cases, the more time we flip the coin, the chance that the majority of these times of these flipping instances will end up with heads increases by the number of flips we do. So if you flip the coin that has 60% chance of ending up heads for 1,000 times, the chance that the majority of cases will be heads is virtually 1, or it's almost 1. It's almost impossible that the majority of cases will result in tails when the heads is 60% likely, and we flip the coins for 1,000 times or more. So That is basically Condorcet's mathematical proof. And what I do is I'm basically saying that all three conditions he says need to be met are in fact not met in contemporary societies. First of all, not all political decisions can be effectively expressed as binary choices. Politics has a lot to do about negotiation, about changing the agenda and so on. And it would be very inefficient, if at all possible, to make all political decisions as binary choices. Second, and maybe even the most important, citizens are not epistemically independent. They receive information from the same sources. They read the same media, the same newspapers, watch the same news stations, and so on. Therefore, this ideal of epistemic independence is not there. At least statistical epistemic independence is not there because they receive information from the same sources. And finally, I'm claiming that at least regarding some political issues and in some situations, citizens are in fact worse than random decision-making procedure like coin flipping and so on. One case can be some demanding issues like I don't know, climate change or nuclear power plants and so on. The other one can be some situations like imagine making racial laws or laws about race in Germany in 1937. It seems that it will be epistemically better to flip the coin than to ask the people what do they think about racial laws and so on. So at least regarding some issues and in some situations, citizens are in fact worse than a random procedure. And my ending idea is that we should reject aggregative democracy and search for proper epistemic value in its deliberative counterpart. So again, where are we so far? I have rejected all these positions and ended up endorsing the position you see here, and that is David Eslund's standard account of epistemic democracy. So let me briefly tell you what, and I mean really briefly, what David Eslund has in mind. Eslund argues, and I fully endorse his view, the idea that in order to have legitimacy generating potential, a decision-making procedure needs to have both moral value, it has to be fair and treat all reasonable citizens as equals, and it has to have epistemic value, that it has to produce better results than any other fair procedure. Not better results than any other procedure, but better results than any other fair procedure. So fairness is the first and more important condition. Epistemic value or quality of results is the second, which is kind of limited since we compare democracy only with other fair decision-making procedures. Why do we do that? Basically because of the liberal criteria of legitimacy. If we have unfair political procedures, then not all citizens will be able to endorse them as free and equal, and not all citizens will be able to recognize their legitimacy. And let me wrap it up towards the end. In the final chapter, which is kind of divided from the rest of the text, I discuss some social and economic conditions that need to be in place in order for deliberative democracy to have this epistemic value. There is a lot of these conditions. I'm discussing only two because of the brevity of the book and the presentation. So first, I argue that we should implement some form of a division of epistemic and political labor with citizens and their representatives setting the aims and values the society is to pursue, and experts and policymakers devising means, laws and decisions for the advancement of these aims. To put it very briefly here, what I'm basically saying is that citizens are those who discuss values and aims. They assemble and get their interest groups, political parties, and so on. They vote in the elections for representatives or parties that further their values and aims. And that is their task. Then we have political representatives in the parliament who deliberate on values and aims, negotiate to achieve majorities in the parliament, and also to adequately address various conflicting interests and conflicting values and aims in politics. And they define the final set of aims that the society is to pursue. Then the executive and administrative government deliberates, which includes experts in the field and so on, but which can also include other stakeholders like representatives of NGOs, universities, institutes, and so on, trade unions, deliberates on the best means to achieve the defined aims, and of course consults different experts. The result is a public policy that actually starts from some set of aims and values that citizens have and implements the technical knowledge and expertise of those who know better in this technical sense, those who know how to create efficient policies, how to create, for example, better power plants, or to create better roads, or how to, I don't know, how to make better fiscal policies and better taxes and so on and so on. So that is the first part. I'm actually arguing in favor of this division of epistemic and political labor. I'm not saying that we should have direct democracy and that direct democracy has epistemic value. In fact, I'm saying that representative democracy characterized by experts and this division of epistemic labor is the one we should follow. And in the final part, I just briefly discuss whether political equality should go deeper than just formal politics. Namely, David Eslund and many others say that political equality should stay with the idea one man or one person, one vote. And that is the formal area of politics. We are all equal in the sense that we have only one vote in the elections and so on. Nonetheless, what I'm more interested in is the informal political sphere. And that concerns funding and financing of political campaigns, or appearing in the media, owning media houses, and so on and so on. And my idea is basically that it's not enough to distribute political power equally in the formal sphere. We should also do so in the informal political sphere. And this, I will argue, it needs more extensive leftist policies of redistribution of wealth and income in order to secure not economic, but primarily political equality that is needed for democracy and for its legitimacy generating potential. So to sum up, because this is the last slide and I will just stop it here, what I actually did in the book is I presented this scheme that uses different three basic tenets of epistemic justification: truth, knowledge, and authority. And I have tried to analyze how different positions can be fit in this scheme. And following the sketch you can see here, I discussed, analyzed, and rejected different positions, ending up with the standard account of epistemic democracy as the appropriate account of democratic legitimacy. And that's more or less it. Thank you for your patience and for bearing up with me in this presentation that I did not intend to be technical, but nonetheless, it seems to me that it was more technical than I hoped it would be. And I'm open for your questions and comments.
Thank you very much for a great talk. Do we have perhaps questions or comments or certain? Okay, maybe I could begin before others. Just sort of maybe I would just like to it's more of a sort of comment, something that I would like to discuss with you, much more than a question directly. Mm-hmm. I have certain sort of reservations with regards to the knowledge tenant as it is, I think, sort of presently understood, in the sense, like I'm not sure that the sort of, if we unpack the knowledge tenant, I wonder if okay, let me put it like this. When there is an idea that there are experts in politics, it usually sort of is implied that these experts are somebody, for instance, when you come to sort of Mill and Scholocracy, these are people who are better educated and so forth, who have some kind of technical knowledge of some sort or the other. And then when you, even if you leave aside some more sort of theoretical and modeling based arguments and just focus on the sort of empirical side of the, when you think of like real experts in the world in this, understood in this sense, they're sort of the typical sort of way to judge that they have more political knowledge is to actually judge their knowledge of politics. So whether, you know, do they know who is the part of the parliament, you know, name of MPs or whatever, or some established political theories and so forth. And this they do very well as opposed to sort of general population. However, this appears to me sort of a strange way to measure something, since this is exactly what they are supposed to, this is what they have PhDs in. I mean, it is quite expected that they will have more knowledge of this kind than general population. But then when you test them in terms of predictions of policies, they do very badly. They do mostly just as well as sort of people who regularly read like The Economist and you know, some whatever, the newspapers or some magazines that deal with everyday politics. So when they're sort of so in this sense, it appears that when you judge them when it counts, you know, at prediction of politics, they do much worse. So in this sense, their expertise is sort of becomes much weaker in this sort of strong epistemic sense. And then on the other hand, there is this sort of possibility of argument that that actually, and this is sort of Elizabeth Anderson and John Dewey, and this idea of experimentalism as a sort of grounds for democracy, for epistemic potential of democracy, is that you can test policies and get feedback on these policies back. And this is how democracy learns. And this is why it's the best sort of epistemic, the best system. And here actually the experts would then be people, because they are the ones who have the best knowledge of what are the effects of policies. So when it comes to the knowledge tenant, it appears to me that you could actually have, like, there are experts in politics, and these experts are like general population. So I just wanted to, as you were talking, I was thinking about this, so I just like to sort of discuss this understanding of if knowledge tenant could be sort of reframed in this way.
Applied upon. Excellent. Thank you, Mark Luca, so much for this comment. And it's really interesting, and I hope we'll discuss it more than now. Nonetheless, I have tried to sketch it or to, you know, to present it. I'll try to present it in three most important points. So the first one is about who are the experts in politics. And I absolutely agree with you that when we talk non-philosophically outside of the area of political philosophy, we usually talk about experts in politics as people from the faculty of political science, some economists, some people who claim that they are državni tajnici or like state secretaries and so on, people who have devoted well, some time of their training and a lot of time of their work to perform some public functions and so on and so on. Nonetheless, that is not the definition I have in the book and in the project, because when I say that, it starts from from the truth tenet. Truth tenet basically says that there are some normative. So there is truth in politics. Basically means, if I'm correct, if I'm defining it correct, something like second. Okay, but it says there are true procedure-independent normative standards for evaluating political decisions. So I'm stressing this idea: normative standards, not descriptive. Or so the idea is it's not about having technical knowledge, but the normative knowledge, what should be done. And then when I say the knowledge tenet, basically says that some or few people know these normative standards better than others. So when I talk about experts in politics, I'm not actually talking about economists, or basically not primarily about economists or public policy experts and so on. I'm talking about people who are considered to have normative and moral knowledge to the greater extent than the others. And so this is why I have these examples of religious leaders or I don't know, university professors teaching ethics at Harvard and so on. So those are those who can be, or maybe even celebrities or even minority groups and so on, those who can be considered by some people to have better normative knowledge than others. So there is this difference between one approach and the second. Now, what's very interesting and I think very problematic, and we come to the second point, is that typically we talk about experts in politics as technical experts. And this can be very dangerous. Why? Because we basically say that those who have some special training and expertise in this technical way, if we say that they should rule, we are basically saying that they should make normative political decisions and not only technical political decisions. So when we mix the two up, we come to very dangerous situations. And I believe that many left-wing politicians, but also many left-wing philosophers and thinkers actually argue that this is that is the problem with contemporary politics. The idea that you have technical experts who indeed are technical experts, nonetheless, we have a tendency to ascribe them moral expertise or normative expertise nonetheless. Saying that politics is not about values and ideologies, politics is about technical solutions. But there are always some hidden presumptions, always some hidden normative ideas behind that. And so that can be a problem. Now, regarding your point about prediction and the ability to predict something, yes, it definitely is the case that not all technical experts can be considered are equally reliable. Let's put it like that. So if you have experts in economy, you have Nobel Prize winning economists arguing completely different things and giving completely different predictions. So that's definitely one of the areas when it's really difficult to assess who the expert is. And if you are making a fiscal public policy or monetary public policy and so on, it's really difficult to say that this person has higher tendency to produce correct outcome than the other one. The same is not the case in some other applied things like architecture, engineering, and so on. If you are, for example, building a bridge over a river, then we usually have no, or even in medicine, we usually have no problem with saying, yeah, that person over there got his engineering degree and he's more suited to build or to construct a bridge over a river than the others. So I think that this is the problem not for all technical experts, but primarily for technical experts in economics or in some other more vaguely defined or more gray zoned disciplines. And finally, and this is an excellent point, your idea that actually those who are experts are people that public policy is applied upon. They are those who know what will happen, how will this affect them, and so on. So they are the experts. I don't think this goes against my ideas in a way. Basically, and this is why, if you recall the second to last slide, I think when I present this scheme, I said that like executive government with its expert commissions, bodies, and so on, should consult, among other things, stakeholders that will be mostly affected by this public policy. So if we are making, I don't know, a law regarding hate crimes, then we should consult people who are, I don't know, ethnic minorities, sexual minorities, and so on, who are mostly victims of such crimes. And maybe we should even advise those who are most often representatives of, I don't know, football clubs and so on, or those who are mostly associated or typically associated with violence against minority groups and so on, to see what's the best way to frame because they are those who will be mostly affected. I probably won't be, since I have nothing to do against the minorities, and I'm not a minority myself. I'm not the one affected by such law. As someone who really hates minorities and is organized in groups that like to beat minorities up, and someone who is minority himself or herself is the one who is most directly affected. So my idea is, of course, they can be considered experts in this area, and they should be consulted. It's not only, the professors at the Faculty of Criminology or something like that who should be advised. Nonetheless, in the end, the final authorization of this decision comes not only from among those most directly affected and the experts, but from the entire political community, because we'll all be paying police, infrastructure, and so on. But the idea is, and that is, I will end with this, and this is a very long answer, and I'm sorry for that. I'm just trying to make it's very important to see the distinction between decision-making process and decision authorization process. What I'm talking mostly is about decision authorization process, because it's where the final political power and legitimacy resides, how we authorize political decisions. This does not imply that the same procedure should be used how we make political decisions. For example, we can authorize political decisions using democratic procedures, but we can make them, especially when some technical expertise is in question, by following the rule of the experts or following the advice of the experts. But in such cases, their right and their role as experts and their role to make political decisions is authorized not by the fact of their expertise, but by the fact that other people have, as free as equal, agreed that these should be considered experts and that these experts should make this or that political decision.
Thank you. So Gabriele and then Sonia.
First of all, congratulations for your book.
Thank you.
It is nice to meet you. I would like to ask a very simple question, but maybe, I don't know, a difficult answer. The question is, what do you think about the procedures and also about the role of expert in the European Union now? In these strange and new institutions?
Okay, excellent. Thank you for the question. I will try to answer it, though it's not really my area of expertise. In fact, during scanning the overall literature and references and bibliography about epistemic democracy, there are in fact some papers discussing the epistemic qualities of European Union as some weird hybrid or something that no one actually knows what it is. I read mostly the abstracts of those papers, so I won't be able to give you some very definite answer. I can give you just my view as a non-expert, because I can say that I'm an expert in political philosophy, but I'm not expert in EU. So but as a non-expert, it seems to me that considering the sheer size of the European Union and the sheer diversity of people, interests, and associations under this huge umbrella of European Union, at least from what I can see, European Union does its best to include experts from various fields and, in fact, stakeholders. I know for sure that different expert bodies and advisory bodies in the EU have representatives from some large NGOs, not NGOs like, I don't know, Association from Youth Development Culture in Opatia, which has 60 members, but I'm talking about Greenpeace. I'm talking about so huge NGOs that have thousands of or hundreds of thousands of members and dozens of employed people and so on. So from that perspective, it seems to me that European Union actually is building upon administration in other Western states that has this idea that we should consult different experts from different fields, including stakeholders, including NGOs, and so on. I personally myself was included on a few occasions, but mostly in I was, for example, contacted by FEPS, Foundation for European Progressive Studies, and that is the foundation of, it's related to the Party of European Socialists and Social Democrats, but it's funded directly. So it's not, it's funded directly by the EU Parliament. They have some funds allotted to that to do education and advisory things. So in fact, we did have meetings first, us like experts, and then meetings with members of the European Parliament on some issues that were considered within our expertise. So the only thing I can say that it's an extremely complex process. That's what I can say from my own experience. European Union itself actually is not, it's not just the Parliament or just the European Commission. It has so many different regulatory bodies and so on. And each of them consults experts and stakeholders in its own way. That it's, you know, all I can say is that from what I can see, it's doing its best, but it's really so much outside of my area of expertise that I can't say anything more.
Thank you. Sonia? Yes, please do.
Hi, yeah, so can you hear me? Yeah?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I'm an outsider to the group, so I'll just say I'm a political economist and from University of Belgrade's Faculty of Economics. Thank you very much for the stimulating talk. So just to understand the theoretical framework, so are you saying that the societal values are exogenously formed prior to epistemic democracy taking place? Like, are you saying we first exogenously form these preferences and values? Because the way I understand it, and I'm interested in governance, is that it is through epistemic democracy that we actually form the values that we want to. So I guess I'm not understanding, are you separating the two? Or,
yes,
or
yes,
not?
yes.
Yeah.
In fact, I am, or I do. I do so in the first tenet, the truth tenet. Basically, the truth tenet says that there are some procedure independent, or at least, and this is like now the complex part, but actual political decision independent standards for evaluating political decisions. So the idea is we can have a procedure, a group of people deliberating, or a group of religious experts leading the community. It doesn't matter what kind of procedure. And we can say that this procedure produced correct or incorrect result. So that is basically the idea, is that there are correct or incorrect results prior to their actual deliberation or prior to their actual decision-making process. And now that's first. And now it gets more complex because there are two different ways to formulate this. The one is to say, and now we're going into moral philosophy, ethics, and so on. One way is to say that, yes, there are some objective facts about morality. For example, genocide is always wrong. And it's just like, you know, that, I don't know, Rijeka is south of Zagreb. Like, you know, that, I don't know, things like that, I don't know, cancer is a dangerous disease. Just like that, you know that genocide is something that's morally wrong. So that's one way of saying that there are moral facts, and political procedures are better or worse depending on their ability to get moral facts correctly, to produce outcomes that correspond to these independent moral facts. That's one way of putting things. The other way of putting things is basically to say, no, there are no independent moral facts. The second one is more constructivist. Say there are no independent moral facts. In fact, what we do is we construct moral reality under some ideal conditions. And then actual political procedure in society is evaluated depending on its ability to approximate what the ideal procedure would produce. So it's more Kantian approach, saying that imagine all people in epistemically ideal conditions without prejudices, biases, and so on, deliberating, and then they will produce some decision. And this decision will be correct independently of anything else. So this will be the correct decision. And now we assess the actual procedure taking place in the Croatian parliament or the Serbian parliament and so on, and say this procedure in the Croatian parliament is epistemically good or bad, depending on its ability to reproduce this decision that will be produced by in epistemically idealized conditions. So these are the two options, but what I'm basically saying is that yes, there are some normative standards that come before actual procedure, decision-making procedure. Therefore, procedure can get it right, or actual procedure can get it right, or actual procedure can get it wrong. And now what they are, we can discuss that if there are some people are interested in moral philosophy, but nonetheless, I think that for this, it's enough to say simply that, yeah, what is it?
Thank you, Ivan. Do we maybe have some more questions? We are already slowly sort of coming to the end of our time for the seminar, but perhaps Valeria? Yes, sure.
Hi, Ivan. Thanks for the presentation. I am not in your field, so I will ask a very simple and profane question, but I hope it might generate some interesting insight. So I was a bit surprised that you mentioned in your presentation multiple times religious leaders as potential candidates for this role of the expertise, which I understand is very complexly framed. But I wonder, like, from your perspective and knowledge, like for my standards of a rational decision making from citizens, that should rule out religious leaders, because for sure that presents so many basic moral contradictions around what is the purpose of a pluralistic community. So I'm particularly interested in how you understand that. Obviously, I would understand that people might have religious beliefs and they would participate still in a community as citizens, not as leaders of a religious group. So that kind of undermines the claim to rationality, not rationality, reasonability that I think you were invoking.
Excellent, thank you so much. And yes, of course, religious leaders are used in the discussion primarily because other authors are using it as an example. Though, nonetheless, I think it can be very useful to help us differentiate precisely between those considered moral experts or normative experts on politics and those considered technical experts, what Marco Luca asked earlier. So we usually see policymakers and I don't know, people who have technical knowledge from universities, institutes, and so on as technical experts. And now the question remains, and it's a very difficult question, who are moral experts? And most people, and I'm not saying that this has anything to do with because most people think so, therefore it should be like that, but people usually regard morality to be linked to religion, and in such cases they believe that, and even if you put it in at some concrete examples like abortion or euthanasia or same-sex marriage and so on, usually what people do is they treat their religious leaders as moral experts, because religion actually does that. A large part of religion, okay, one part is about tradition and what food can you eat on which day and so on, but the other part is of course about moral standards and moral rules and so on. So what a lot of people does is in fact that they follow their religious leaders as some form of experts. And now some ideas put aside, it seems that there are, so in order to be considered a religious expert, you usually have to go through some form of education, which includes some normative considerations, whether it is teaching the 10 Commandments and the Bible, but faculties of theology or religious studies and so on also have some training in relation to ethics and moral philosophy and so on. Of course, we can say that this is not correct or not the relevant type of training and so on, but because of the conditions of reasonable pluralism in which various people can hold different reasonable views, we the best thing we can do is simply endorse that people ascribe moral competence to different citizens, and a lot of religious people in fact ascribe moral competence to their religious leaders. So this is more or less like a fact, and not it should be or it should not be like that. It just happens that when you have a discussion on abortion or a discussion on euthanasia in Croatia, typical Catholics will say, but the Pope said this. Okay, luckily there is a liberal Pope now, so but otherwise they will appeal to some form of religious authority and so on. The problem comes when you say, because this religious authority said this and that, such a decision should be made legitimate, or such a decision should be enforced. So basically the idea is, of course, we can disagree on who the experts are, and we typically do that. Some people follow Catholic priests, some people follow Muslim religious leaders, some people follow philosophy professors from Harvard. Nonetheless, the idea is that from mere recognition that there are experts, it does not imply that experts are those who should rule. So this is my defense, or the way how I defend democracy, saying that we can agree that there are some who are better in producing correct normative decisions and producing decisions better to some normative standards. Nonetheless, the fact that there are those who are better does not imply that they should rule, unless we can all agree that they are better. In most normative issues, we cannot agree on who the experts are. Therefore, we cannot ascribe political authority to any particular group of experts. But, and this is the final part, in some other fields, we can publicly agree who the experts are. For example, in medicine, emergency, or the best situation is, imagine case you are flying in an airplane, and suddenly the flight attendant comes and says, you should move here. We are in an emergency situation. You should move here. Now, it seems that in cases like during your flight, or if you are on a road and there has been some terrible traffic accident and someone says, I'm a doctor, you should come here and press this man's wound here to stop him from bleeding. In such cases, we can all, it seems, agree that there are experts in this field. And in fact, sometimes we even have a duty to follow experts, because our decisions and what we do will affect the lives of others. For example, if I'm at the scene of a traffic accident and someone says, I'm a doctor, you should press here to stop him from bleeding. And I say, why should I listen to you? I won't do that. But it seems that we have a moral duty to help those who are in immediate danger without putting ourselves at risk. And it seems that the best instrument in such cases is to follow the expertise of those that can publicly be recognized as experts. So in such cases, we can even say that the experts should rule, because we can publicly agree that the doctor is an expert how to treat a seriously injured person on the street and so on. Nonetheless, when we talk about normative issues, like how should we, who should get medical care, or which medical procedure should be free and which should not be free, or should we allow euthanasia or not, and so on. In such cases, there might be experts, but we cannot publicly agree on who the experts are. And that is enough to block any form of epistocracy or the rule by any group of experts. So that's the basic idea.
Thank you. I think that Holger also raised his hand at one point, but
Hi. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Hi, I'm Holger from Tallinn University, Estonia. I might be joining you for a year in autumn, hopefully, if all goes well. And I'm also researching epistemic democracy.
Oh, that's great.
And I would maybe go to the quite a fundamental issue that I have myself. And as you define the standard approach of epistemic democracy as one that both appeals, and the context is justification of governance or the hierarchy of power and so on. And then So my cat also wants to join. The fundamental issue, if we call epistemic democracy something that appeals both to moral aspects and to epistemic aspects, is why not call it moral democracy and say that it appeals both to moral and epistemic aspects? So is it a shorthand, and can you, as a philosopher, as a fellow philosopher, accept this shorthand, or are you also feeling always this stick that it should actually, what I mean by epistemic democracy is interpretation of democracies that involves an appeal to epistemic values, among others, not well, similarly to deliberative democracy, which doesn't mean that all that there is to democracy is deliberation, but it is distinguished from other approaches to democracy. Or how do you feel about the concept overall?
Yeah, I think excellent. Thank you so much for this question. And yeah, it's really up to the point. First of all, when I'm saying, well, epistemic democracy is a very broad area of theoretical discussion. And as you have seen, some of these accounts I have sketched, in fact, completely disregard moral considerations. For example, instrumentalism typically says it's not important how political decisions are made, the important or what are the intrinsic moral qualities of the process that made them. What's important is that these decisions are correct, and then we can justify some decision-making procedure based on the quality of the outcomes that it produces. So what epistemic democracy, as this really wide phenomenon does, it gathers different approaches that say that epistemic value is at least one of the considerations that have to be taken into account. And now there are some more and some less epistemic. In fact, I think David Estlund actually calls it like correctness theory, or the idea that what constitutes legitimacy generating potential of a procedure is its ability to produce correct results, is a correctness theory, and it's Estlund actually calls it too epistemic. It's too epistemic. Why? Because it fails to meet the liberal criteria of legitimacy, which is basically a moral principle and not an epistemic principle. The position that I defend, and also the position defended by Jose Luis Marti and David Estlund and so on, is the position that basically grounds justification in moral ideas and not in epistemic ideas. Nonetheless, it says, so the idea is we have some duties towards others. Those duties are moral duties. Nonetheless, in order to discharge these duties we have towards others, we should embrace a decision-making procedure that has the highest epistemic quality. And that is, in this case, democracy, because we can all agree that among those procedures that are fair, democracy has the highest epistemic quality, something like that. So the basic idea is, and this is interesting, I actually published, actually I did not, it is still in production, but soon it will be out, a paper on Snježana Prijić-Samardžija and her book, Truth and Democracy, I think. It should be out in a month or two. And it's in that paper, Prijić-Samardžija, our rector, actually accuses David Estlund of being not epistemic enough in a way that it seems that his primary criterion is a moral one and not an epistemic one, because he disregards and rejects some epistemically valuable procedures by saying they don't meet the moral standards. They are not publicly acceptable to everyone, or at least to all reasonable citizens or qualified citizens. Therefore, they can be rejected even though they might have a huge epistemic value. And yeah, that can be a good objection. I personally don't agree with that. And in this paper, I try to demonstrate why it's important to ground political legitimacy not as an epistemic notion, but as a moral notion primarily. Nonetheless, this does not imply that it is only that it has nothing to do with the quality of results. In fact, it has a lot to do about the quality of results. And because the quality of results can affect others around us, there is a moral duty to follow the procedure that has the highest tendency to produce correct results. So that's basically, it combines one and the other. And particularly in this instance, it gives some kind of supremacy or precedence to the moral criteria, basically because it's political philosophy. In a way that when we discuss issues within political philosophy, we are basically discussing moral arguments for or against some things. And what David Estrel and other defenders of standard account of epistemic democracy do is they basically say yes, we should ground ideas of legitimacy and authority on normal grounds. Nonetheless, this does not mean that they don't detail some epistemic considerations related to the quality of outcomes and so on. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Do we perhaps have some other questions? Yeah, I think it's already 11:30, so I think we should wrap it up slowly.
I have just two small notes. So the first one is, if anyone wants a book, I have it in Ciao, Kat. I have it in PDF. So if anyone wants the book, just let me know or let Marco Luca know, and I can distribute it by PDF. And the second is the Center for Advanced Studies and Faculty of Humanities and the University of Rijeka are organizing a summer school, Equality and Citizenship. It's a summer school that takes place every year from 2014 till now, except of course for this COVID-infested 2020. We have 3 leading speakers. It's usually 2 from abroad and 1 from Croatia. From abroad, I think we have, what's his name? Kolis Tazib. I think he's a now assistant professor from Oxford, and he's working on a book on liberalism and perfectionism. He's trying to actually combine the 2 views. It's really interesting. So if you are interested, you can apply with a paper or just to participate in the discussions. The second participant is Ingrid Robeins from Netherlands. She has a lot of work about capabilities and capability approach. Nonetheless, nowadays, her most recent work is about limitarianism. The idea that, so the basic idea is huge inequalities in wealth are bad. What we have to do is we have to construct a society in which there are no extremely rich people. So that's her idea and her normative thesis. If someone wants to engage her on that or discuss that, how huge inequalities and especially how having extremely wealthy people in a society can be dangerous or harmful for the society. And if you want to discuss something on these issues, you can also apply. The third speaker is I am the third speaker. So in case you are interested in discussing something or even presenting something related to my book or epistemic democracy in general, it's enough to put 1 or 2 references, like to pretend that it's about my book. I won't mind. Then you can also apply. I think that the deadline will be, so the summer school is from 12th to 16th of July. So I think the deadline for applications will be probably by 4th of July or something like that, with your title and your name and affiliation. If you are interested in presenting paper about any of the 3 authors just named, you are more than welcome. And also if you want to just participate as discussants and to listen to the ongoing discussions and presentations, you are of course more than welcome to do so.
Perfect. Thank you for this as well. Thank you very much, Ivan, for a great talk, and I'm looking forward to our future discussions on these topics and to equality and citizenship sessions as well. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and see you next Thursday. Take care.
Ciao.
Ciao.